Hello, how are we all doing? I hope we're all okay. There is people out there, right? Okay, good.
We thought you were left, so...
Yeah. So hi, I'm Paul, formerly the Global Head of Media at Vodafone, now consulting, which is a wonderful journey. That's what I've been doing this year, consulting, kind of like a freelance CMO to the ad tech and martech business industry, and that's been absolutely great. We've been watching out back, some brilliant presentations from Magda, JP, and Brian earlier, so I hope you've all enjoyed them. Now, though, I have the pleasure to introduce a panel of practitioners. So stellar marketers and people I count as friends, at least before this conversation starts. So to my left, we have Beatrice, who's currently the Global Media Director at Danone. And breaking news for Mediatel is that she's just about to leave Danone. So in about a week or two, she'll be like me, the former something or other.
I'll be on a beach in Bali in a couple of weeks, actually.
Which is fucking great, actually. That's a great move. Carly, a really old friend. Well, not that old.
I'm not that old.
Who's the group head of media at Sky. Like a brilliant business, and she's just an excellent operator in her field, and she's a punchy Australian, so let's see how that goes today. And Vima, if anybody mispronounces his name like I have done for the last year, Vima Schneiders, who is the author, I'm going to give him a plug, of this incredible book, Eat Your Greens, about evidence-based marketing. Thoroughly lovely guy, and is a partner and consultant as well at what's the business called?
The Commercial Works.
Lovely,
yep.
Awesome. So hopefully what you've got here is a bunch of marketers talking about, well, I wonder if somebody could flick on the slide for me. I don't have a clicker. Thank you very much. So we're here to talk about the rules of brand growth and how brands grow. And so as a bunch of marketers, you're not going to get a punchy debate about the rules themselves. It's actually going to be more of a love-in, to be honest, about kind of the work from Eringer Bass and the work from the IPA. What we will get into, I think, is going to be a good debate around how those rules may or may not be changing within a digital world. And I think, well, let's just crack on with that. Let's start with marketing. So kind of taking it up a level, really. So, I mean, this is one of my favourite subjects, actually, as a passionate kind of 20-year marketer. I've watched with dismay, to a certain extent, how the function of marketing and CMO, the role of the CMO, has kind of been eroded over time, and the erosion of the role is something that the CMO of MasterCard and WFA president spoke about last week, and I kind of look on with disappointment at the rebranding of the CMO role to kind of CDO or CGO or whatever, and all of that crap. I think as marketers we should be proud about our function and look to kind of live those values. However, that one of the reasons for that erosion is accountability. It's one of the least respected roles within the C-suite peer set, and I kind of find that quite interesting. And I wonder, the rules themselves are meant to make marketing accountable, brand growth accountable and measurable. It's meant to give it discipline. And so this isn't my show, clearly. I should let the panel speak at some point.
Go on, Paul.
Maybe I should have been over there.
Go on, Paul.
Yeah, I can keep going. I'm going to open that one. I'm going to give it to Vima to start with, which is kind of like, what's your thoughts on that? Why have marketers just not been listening to the rules? Because these are like a decade old now, in terms of them being established.
Yeah, no. I think a decade ago, someone summarized the work from 6 decades, essentially. So it's been around much longer. So who's read the book, actually? Right, okay. Well, sorry, both. All right, yeah, because that's what you typically see.
I read this one, Vima.
Yeah,
I went straight from this one.
for decades, it's actually quite clear how brands grow and how consumer choice sort of works and the patterns that we find they're in. And Magda's told about that before this panel, obviously. You talked about the erosion of the role of the CMO, and I think CMOs to a certain extent sort of seem to forget that they are what you could call the integrating discipline. We need to play across all the 4 Ps or the whole marketing mix. But very often the whole marketing industry and marketers themselves are just so very much talking about that very one small bit of marketing, which is P of promotion or the communication stuff. And that's maybe because that's sort of the interesting and the exciting bit of it. People just probably don't want to talk about distribution or price, because that's a bit boring, isn't it? It's much more fun to talk about campaigns and rebrandings, and look, we turned it into magenta instead of yellow, and we've got a rabbit now. So
it's a favourite part of my role, actually.
Yeah, exactly. So there are people ranting about the fact that communications only makes up 8% of the whole marketing mix. But quite often the people that are ranting about that just only talk about campaigns also. So it's just a thing I think we're all obsessed with, because it's the stuff where all the exciting things happen. So I think marketers need to have a look in the mirror themselves as well. I think they should be concerned with communicating across all the Ps and explaining how all those work together, knit together, and how they can drive value, and how they as marketers contribute to all of that.
What about you guys? Can you look in that mirror? What do you think?
I think that it came out a decade ago, and a decade ago probably we weren't that lost actually in a weird way, and then we lost our way somehow along the way.
That's ironic.
That's my honest perception, maybe a little bit. And I think we got a little bit lost in the campaigning and in the weeds of things, so we kind of forgot the brand, and we forgot the fundamental things that we knew, and we were kind of going, thinking that data would solve all our problems just as long as we organized it the right way. So I think that's kind of the pendulum that's swinging back now a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we probably spent a lot of time measuring a lot of things over the last 10 years.
Yes.
But as a big marketing organization, I still think we as an organization believe in comms and the importance of it. We are constantly reassessing what we should be measuring, what we shouldn't be measuring. We haven't got it perfect, but the rules that you've just popped up that have now disappeared, that's something that we're spending a lot of time re-educating our business on, and how important they are, even with the change of the way that we're either measuring or going to market and the product sets that we've got.
Yeah. I'm going to take that as a segue into my next question around measurement. And could you flick the slide back up again? And let's keep it on there. You don't need to see me twice, God, for the benefit of the audience. Because I'm kind of with you on that, Carly. I think modern marketing has been plagued by measurement and the measurement of the wrong things. And I think potentially data and technology and the digital advertising ecosystem has kind of drawn marketers into really measuring what is in effect short-term outcomes and potentially metrics that maybe are less meaningful than they should be. And one of my favorite examples is around selection effects, and which is the idea of giving undue credit to something, to an action which should have gone elsewhere. I kind of just wondered, if brands and businesses are built over the longer term, why are they really measuring quarters? How do you guys think about that? Do you think we're measuring the right stuff?
I think that the ability to measure sometimes makes us measure more and very, very granularly. I explain it, we do a lot of education as well, and I've done a lot of education, which is that we shouldn't mistake, first of all, media KPIs for actually the objectives that you're trying to do with your brands, which very often happens, that you say, oh, I want reach, and that's the objective. No, probably your objective is something to do with driving the business, and it's going to be something that positions your brand, and how you do that, then measure it through to media can be, usually there's a scalability, there's a quality element to it, there's a cost element to it, and all that kind of stuff. So that's something that I see quite a lot, which is kind of getting the KPI and turning it into objective, which is a little bit the wrong way around. Going back to what we were saying about looking at the full picture, 4 Ps, etc. That's not a campaign tactic. And I love data. I'm a data scientist, so I think it's amazing that you measure the details, just that you know you're measuring the details when you do that.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of KPIs that we measure, and I think the skill of the marketing is trying to decide which ones to focus on and how they all, as much as you can, interrelate, which is the difficulty with what we were talking about, the competing parts of our businesses that have different KPIs as well. Integrating them all.
So there's an easiness to measuring kind of short-term metrics, I think. Is it easy to measure the long-term effects of brand building and growth?
I guess having people focus on the vital few instead of the confusing many is sort of, I think that's sort of the big challenge that we're having now.
Yeah.
You know, it's very easy to measure a lot of things, and and when you start measuring things, it's nice to measure things that move around and jump around. So that's because your brand tracker shows something is improving, and so that makes the media agency happy. It makes the planners happy. Look how well our campaign is doing, but you could potentially be doing completely the wrong things.
Well, that's the version of the attribution modeling, for instance. I mean, it's very tangible, so it's a good thing, of course, to have attribution models. I'm very pro that, but that may not be solving your entire measurement requirements.
No, exactly. So we like to see stuff moving around, so we can end up doing things that will make that happen. But actually, those can be very much the wrong things, and indeed, the stuff that we're measuring might be very much focused on, very short-term effects, and we're not measuring things that happen over a long period of time. I think Magda was also just saying, most people just buy once in a year, but there's actually a lot of people that only buy once in 5 years. How are you going to measure all those little effects? How are you going to find these people? And actually, if you probably do media planning right, but you are the experts on this, but you might actually want to see less actually happening and moving because you're spreading it out evenly, so you're reaching as many people as you can. So, but that's not interesting if you're selling something that is measuring movement essentially. So, it's short-term variance.
And this short-term, long-term thing, which was established, empirically established via the work that Binet Field did back in 2013, and we're still kind of wrestling with it now as marketers. It's so important, I think, that balance between long-term investment and the applicability of resources devoted to that growth over that, beyond the short term. In fact, I named my little business 60/40. It's kind of in recognition of that. Love Binet Fields. And so I kind of wondered for you guys, how much are you seeing that balance evidenced within marketing practice right now? How much do your individual kind of businesses, the businesses that you work with, Vima, kind of adhere to a good balanced approach to long and short term? Because that feels really at the heart of what we're talking about. What do you think, mate?
I'll start. Shall I start?
Yeah, sorry.
I think as a marketing department, we do understand the importance of the long and the short term of it, obviously, pardon the pun. But when sales need to be in for the next quarter, that does get thrown out the window. We are a commercial business and we need to make sure that we get the sales that we need to get. But we are in the process right now of just re-examining how we measure both the long and the short term together. I think too long, to what we were discussing backstage, was too long we've been looking at how many short-term metrics and how many long-term metrics, which to your point, brand tracking doesn't move around a lot. It's not very sexy in that way. But trying to work in a measurement framework that pulls these two parts together. And so when we're talking to the C-suite about our short-term metrics, we're also going to be starting to talk more so about the long-term metrics and what we'd expect and what those check-in points to on those long-term metrics. So to make sure that the strategy that we've set, whatever we've set it, is still on track and we don't need to course correct on that. So that's an education job that's currently going on in our business and very much live example. But I think from a marketing point of view, we've got to be a little bit brave and stand behind what we're putting out there in front of the C-suite.
It's crazy. Yeah. It's crazy as in we need to be brave to support the longer term to a certain extent. Is that?
No, we need to be brave in that this is our strategy. This is how we're going to do it. We know that we have to hit the sales goals, but we know we've got to drive these long-term metrics as well. Yeah. And this is how we're going to do it. And
You're not crazy.
I think that's the, sorry?
You're not crazy.
I'm crazy for many other reasons, but that's not one of them.
Yeah. What do you think? How's Danone?
Very similarly, I mean, to what you're saying, I think it's recognition definitely that there's the short-term effect and the long-term effect, making sure that everyone in the business understands both sides. So whether you're on the sales side or marketing side, everyone's kind of understanding the same thing. I think that at the moment there's a big light at the end of the tunnel, which is actually that modeling and, like, if you like, econometrics and that kind of stuff is becoming more readily accessible actually. So it's becoming cheaper for advertisers to do. You know, data's a little bit more organized, etc. So if I look back to it 15 years ago, now it's actually can be done quicker, more efficiently, kind of robustly. So I see that as something extremely positive, because I don't think that solves naturally. It's a probabilistic model, right? So you don't know if it's exactly going to happen that way, but it gives a robustness of thinking to start looking at baseline and top line growth and what's kind of driving each. So I think that's a very positive development. But yeah, it's...
Vima, do you find it an easy sell into your clients?
No, not necessarily easy. So I think, most marketers are indeed focused more on shorter terms. I think the bigger challenge is more helping them to understand why that longer term focus is important, or just required if they want to grow. Simply because that's just how consumer choice works, and how often what buyer behavior looks like. Any business is just dependent on a lot of people that do a little, and that just means that you will need to take on a long-term perspective. And if you want to get penetration, if you are convinced that that's the way you should grow your brand, and then if you understand how buying works, that typically then helps a lot, and people appreciate that they need to do things that are more focused on the longer term. I don't really talk much about 60-40, 80-20 necessarily in terms of that ratio, to be honest. I don't have those discussions very often. It's more about just helping them understand the need for a long-term view.
More about the principle, yeah?
Yeah, more about a very fundamental pattern in our buying, which is not the ratio Les and Peter describe. It's something I refer to as a banana, but that's for another talk. But yeah, a very fundamental pattern in our buying, which if people understand that, they understand they need to take a longer term view on things.
Okay. I have a little bit of an observation on the talent agenda within marketing as well. So I'm 20 years within this kind of marketing gig. I've seen kind of generations of marketers, I guess, kind of come through, and I'm seeing more of the current generation of marketers, I guess, where their vocation is maybe more specialized, more operational, more technical, programmatic, paid social, search, and not kind of recognizing that they're part of marketing almost kind of just seeing, again, within the funnel, let's say, just for argument's sake, at the lower end of the funnel, that's their role, that's their accountability, that there isn't this kind of bigger driver of positive brand bias and consideration. Do you guys see the same within your own businesses, that same division, I guess, generational division, or do you see that in the people you work with? You don't have to name anybody specifically, but I'm kind of like, is that just me? Am I just living in a bubble of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I can see it in the structure, and seeing that in many companies, the structure of how the company is organized can kind of drive that divide. And I mean, a lot of the work that I've done, for instance, is making sure that when you use performance marketing, brand marketing, whatever you want to call it, but just again, what's the difference between the two? And going back to the measurement, when you're driving performance marketing, you're going to do immediate sales, you're going to get that money back very quickly. When you're doing kind of long-term KPIs, that's going to take a little bit longer period. So yes, and then I have a strong belief as well that the future also is the best planners. The planners are going to be very, very, very critical. And part of what I did at Danone, for instance, was taking in more planners that could really strategically position the brands in a good way and kind of plan it out. So I think we're seeing a revival of the planners. Not that they were gone, but planners to keep.
I'd love that. That'd be very cool.
Yeah, I think we need more specialists in the specific areas, whether it be programmatic or
Yeah.
search or any of these other areas. But I think still as marketing leaders within an organisation, it's our jobs to stitch that together, be it because of there's silos within our business and the way we need to drive sales. But that's, I don't think, necessarily different than what previous
So the
incarnations
talent
of it.
observation is probably incorrect then on a generational piece, and the education of being a marketer in that kind of well-rounded observation, and more kind of functional, I think, kind of the functional stitching together of different parts of the marketing
But
organisation.
there were different specialisms already
Yeah,
15
exactly.
years ago.
Exactly.
and,
There were different
you know, like-
specialisms before.
Yeah.
I think it's our job as marketing leaders to be educating our teams, even if they're not yet at that strategic level and through the processes. But we're always going to need those specialisms. I think it's just, as I said, the marketing leaders need to be stitching that together as a strategic piece.
Yeah. To get into organisational structural
It's
work.
just about having the correct mix, isn't it? It's just making sure you have capable people with certain expertise and experience within your teams. As a marketing director or CMO, obviously, you might probably perceive yourself more as a pilot. You don't need to know everything about the thing that you're flying. You need to know.
Pilots
You
do.
don't- Well, a pilot doesn't need to be able to put the whole thing together, So you've got specialised people to help you do that. But you need to make sure you stay on track and on course, or decide on the direction you're going. But as a I don't know. It's I guess as a CMO, it's more about course, making sure you've got a good team with capable, qualified people. And you obviously need to sort of keep an eye out on new things and whether they're interesting, and test them against things that we've established and known, and to what degree it will add value or not by bringing that along or doing these things or not. So I don't know. Testing against fundamental things, established knowledge, and then making sure you've got the right mix of things is just the way you need to go about it. If you ask me,
Okay.
it's not a generational thing, I suppose.
Okay. Good to be put in my place as an as an aging marketer, let's call it that. So look, the kind of title of this panel was around, have digital advertising conditions kind of broken the rules, changed the rules? Do the rules still stand? I don't think we've kind of addressed that one kind of squarely within the questions that I've asked. Clearly, an incredibly poor moderator. Let's kind of tackle that one straight on. Do the rules still stand for marketing right now and for brand growth going forwards? What's the position within the room?
I'll keep it short. Yeah, they're still the same.
Yeah.
Consumer choices has not changed essentially fundamentally, but
Yeah, it's still the same. It's about the consumer and how they engage with our brand. That's probably changed a bit, but
the
rules are the same.
Rules are the same. Tactics change a little bit, but yeah.
Mic drop. Nice. Yeah, I mean, happily, I kind of agree as well. I said we'd kind of have a bit of a love-in to a certain extent, and I think it's their applicability. It's grappling with kind of those changing conditions that digital can bring, and applying them in kind of different ways, I guess, and around functions as an example, kind of ensuring everything kind of is still joined up, everything's holistic, that we're kind of working towards a total customer journey. I kind of agree. I guess last question before opening up to the audience for questions. Let's try that. So I thought this was quite an interesting observation from that Brian, to a certain extent, and Magda picked up on their presentation, which is about the size of a business and how that impacts on the rules and on brand growth. So let's look at this in different ways, because I think the interesting observations they gave were on like DTC businesses and e-commerce, smaller, more agile businesses. What about, you have Sky, one of the UK's biggest businesses, Danone, huge FMCG business, oil tankers, right? So what's made those oil tankers successful in the past, would you say? Who's going to pick that one up?
We've got good product and good marketing. So
Applying the rules.
Yeah, exactly.
And do they still apply, is it because they're big that those rules apply? Does that make sense?
No, but I think it's a lot of time we look at challenger brands and we sometimes discuss whether they're breaking the rules like Magda was saying, which is probably maybe because they don't have the investment behind them necessarily from the get-go.
Yeah.
But once they do have a scalability, and we were touching on a little bit of like also digital brands like Netflix or Chobani was a good example there from the yogurt business, then the rules start to apply, don't they? So, and you have to look at relative terms. Like this was a very anecdotal thing, but I was talking to a friend who has a tiny, tiny company, and like a turnover $1 million, and he called me and said, can you help me understand how AdWords work? I was like, well, hopefully I can if I'm a decent media person. But looking at it, he was kind of applying the rules to this tiny, tiny company inadvertently by trying to get like people to know about his brand, applying it, you know, having a consistency, though his investment was, you know, 10,000 euros or whatever it was at the end of the day. So yeah, it applies. It's organizationally, maybe more challenging to change an old tanker than a smaller organization.
Yeah, that's true enough.
Yeah, I agree. I think we just have bigger goals because we're a bigger company.
Yeah.
It's a slight difference, billion-dollar brand versus $1 million.
Exactly. But I think the rules apply equally.
You must work with a range of different
So
client
I'm looking at all the tankers, and I'm just a little speedboat or a rowing boat, probably with one paddle. You know, but if I could afford advertising, I would advertise. It's very simple. I think my colleague had a nice story, because I'm not from the UK, but he mentioned how Walker's grew as a brand, and it really literally just started with one shop. And, you know, these guys were just bringing around crisps around their premises, or just where they were based, and just gradually improved and increased their mental and physical availability. And, you know, they had something that was halfway decent, so people said, well, can you give me another one? And maybe just bring 2 or 3 then. And, you know, just gradually grew the business. And now it's Walker's Chips, which is a pretty big business. And so indeed, so, I don't know, big brands have been small and they grew, and the way they do that is still the same.
Yeah.
And I just need to keep reminding myself I need to save a bit for advertising.
One of the D2C businesses you guys might know is Huel. It's like a food meal replacement kind of product. I'm probably doing a disservice there. And there was a story earlier on in the year where they and historically as a business, classic D2C business, built themselves off of social platforms. They went on TV and immediately went off TV, like at the instruction of the CEO, based on the fact that they were measuring TV in the same way that they were expecting kind of performance outcomes and immediacy of outcomes, like the lower funnel stuff. And that would be my concern as I kind of think about kind of oil tankers and speedboats, is that the speedboats kind of might measure themselves or might look to measure their activities in potentially the wrong ways. I mean, have you seen that as well as an observation?
But there was an article that was quite recently, which was around, obviously, booking. I think you were the one that brought it up, for instance, yeah? Or anyone's read it? And I mean, I know that they are kind of evaluated because they're a very performance-driven company, and then they went into TV, and I just kind of saw that they were having a discussion on whether that was right or whether that was wrong. I have no answer whatsoever. I just saw the article kind of popping up. But fundamentally, yeah, I mean, the rules kind of apply the same way. But yes, if you do try to measure TV the same way that you measure any other media, it's going to be problematic. It's problematic information.
Yeah, it's just making, so I've worked for a company that thought they were very different compared to some of their competitors, and they didn't have a lot of money, so they thought they should be spending it on cheaper media, such as social media, in order to build reach. And I think, you know, that's perfectly fine. It's just the way you use these media, and if you then use them in, you know, according to what we know, and you sort of swim with the current instead of against, you can still, you know, get some really spectacular results actually, and, you know, not sort of advertising through mass media or whatever, you know, just because you're small you can't afford it. You know, there are just ways of doing spectacularly well, as long as you just, you know, if you're smart, go about it in a smart way and just use the rules to your advantage.
Set the right objectives and so on.
So, good creative.
Yeah. Okay. Big fan of TV, so I'm sure some of you guys have an interest in that as well. So good to know kind of traditional media still got a place within the rules.
Definitely.
Good. Okay. So look, we're running out of time. I guess we could open up questions to the floor. You might not ever get this opportunity again. 4 incredible marketers. Well, 3 incredible marketers and myself.
Repeat my questions so people can hear. Oh, I'm going to get mine.
I'm always repeating what you say, Justin.
So yeah, this is a TV event. I'm not sure this is on. This is a TV event. So what can TV do to apply this theory that you all so heartedly support? What do you want from TV to help you make buying decisions to execute on this theory?
Who's going to go first? I would say universal measurement is...
Yeah.
Oh, for fuck's No, I mean, if I can, let me say, I'm just kidding. No, but universal measurement, I think, of TV, you know, we've got this collision of the old and new world, linear and connected, coming together. Getting to a common currency, I think, is incredibly important from a trading perspective, but being able to measure both brand and performance outcomes, because TV can do both, I think is really, really important. And we're just not there yet. It's kind of a car crash in slow motion unless the industry kind of addresses that.
Yeah, I would echo that. I mean, I've been heavily involved, for instance, in the World Federation of Advertisers, with the Media Charter, with kind of setting up rules around how to behave in digital. And one offspring of that is that we worked a lot on cross-media measurements. And I think that in order to make that work, because that is a big mammoth to make that work, then you need to see kind of uncommon collaborations. So I know that they did like workshops, for instance, in the last few months where you had TV owners, the big digital platforms, measurement companies, advertisers, but actually some people that generally are not in the room necessarily discussing the cross-media measurement piece. And I thought that was a positive step in the right direction. They were leaning into that.
I don't know if I can answer this question. I'm a big supporter of TV. I work at a TV
Slightly
company.
biased. Yeah.
Well, if you look at mental availability as just purely, you know, you as a brand, you need recognition, you need to be relevant, you need to be saying the right things, and you need to reach enough people. So what I want from TV is that it continues to deliver the big, fat, broad net reach that it does. And sure, play around with being targeted in very particular areas if possible, but I just like it to stay it the way it is, actually, because it's working really, really, really well. Really well.
Yeah, I'd share that concern.
Yeah.
Any more questions? Favorite color, star sign, that kind of stuff?
We speak a lot about advertising and often keep reverting back to advertising. And being in the context that we are today, talking about TV, what are your thoughts as marketers about content and the space of content development as opposed to just traditional advertising?
Cool.
Okay.
I'm going to shut up.
Well, it plays a huge role, obviously, because the media alone, we're not telling the right stories, is kind of pointless. But as a media expert, I do play squarely in the media space. But yeah, obviously, content is critical.
What do you mean by content?
What's the content?
Okay, so AFPs, development of content replacing traditional advertising. We're starting to see, specifically in South Africa, where we are getting blocked a lot by fewer and fewer advertising opportunities, we're starting to see more and more opportunity for brands to start developing content. And real content, I'm not just talking about AFPs in the television world. I mean, we are also talking about social content, et cetera, et cetera. So what are your thoughts around content? Because this is a new area that advertising, there's a lot of advertising investment going into two areas: agile adaptation for content and actual original content development for brands.
So in that context, I mean, I've also been in media for like 20 years, and I did a lot of co-productions 20 years ago with TV stations, etc. So for a mature brand, I don't think it's that new, to be honest. It's kind of what the story you're trying to tell about your brand and what you want consumers to know about it. And one step in that is naturally going to be partnering up with certain media owners to kind of maybe do content together, or you're using production companies to do it. So for me, it's kind of critical is what you're trying to achieve with your brand and with your communication. And it's taken a slightly different style. You might use influencers, etc., but the fundament of it is very similar to the soap opera 40 years ago, 45 years ago. Anyway.
Yeah.
I suppose there's two things that come to mind for me. Is sort of cost. So what will that all cost? And you know, I think there's a great future for content. You know, as there is a great future for great movies and great books. it's just really hard to write a good book or, you know, create a good movie.
Yeah.
It's just, you know.
God, he just doesn't stop. It's a relentless plugging for his book.
So
I echo that. It's about
I
the
think-
quality of the content and
Yeah.
also then how the consumer is going to interact, and then the scale of that content, how it interacts with the rest of your media mix.
this is a bit the problem, isn't it, with digital? It's just, it has become so cheap to produce content and to distribute it that it's actually, you know, content has always been crap. You know, there have always been bad books and good books, but it's actually now probably more easy to see how much bad content there is. So I think we should just all be very careful with, you know, what we really want and can do with regards to content, because I think people don't mind advertising as long as it's entertaining and of a high quality. But with digital, it's now much more easy to just show people a lot of not so very entertaining, very boring, annoying stuff, content.
Cool. Nicely done. Should we call that a day, Justin?
Yeah.
Exit stage left.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.